Hey guys, I just wanted to talk to you guys about the current state of a lot of fandoms and how I really see how it's changed over the past 5 years. Because I really see that it's kind of going downhill a little bit. I know a lot of you might know that before 2020, fandoms were overall fairly niche. I think there were some fandoms that were popular, like Marvel and Star Wars, even Pokemon to some extent, but they were all very well known, very popular. A lot of the nicher stuff were more looked down upon. It wasn't really cool to be seen as a nerd, all that stuff, right? And then 2020 hits, people have a lot more time to read, watch movies and TV, all that stuff. So a lot of fandoms really exploded in popularity. I know especially the manga and anime community really exploded because people were like, hey, what the heck? Why not give this show a try that my weird friend's been telling me about for 10 years or whatever. And so there was an explosion in watching and literally anything that people could get their hands on to watch or read. People were getting into it. But then you look at nowadays, and a lot of it's for good reason, people have kind of started to change their mindset, kind of back away from trying to read and watch as much anime as they can or whatever, and kind of go back to there's a divide where this type of anime is weird and you shouldn't watch it at all, and then there's this type of anime that's everyone should read and watch it and all that stuff, right? No matter what kind of whatever. I'm not going to go into too many specifics in this, but it's just really interesting to see this really subtle shift to this is this popular stuff is cool to cool, you should be watching it, and this stuff, no, why, that's weird, you're a weeb, if you watch this and you're gross, which some are definitely do deserve it. But my point is that there's been a shift over the past year or so. Really, the peak of anime was in manga popularity just in general, I'd say it's 2022 or 2023, and it kind of declined over the course of 2024 and into halfway into 2025. And it's just really interesting to see the shift. Back in the peak, in 2022 and 2023, there were people who would buy 1,000+ volume collections of manga and not read a single book just to have it and just to show it off. I personally never did that. I would read my stuff and review it and all that stuff. But there were definitely a segment of the people who were collecting who just had it for display. And it was just really weird. And then around late 2023 into 2024, you saw a lot of those people drop off and stop collecting and all that stuff. It was just really interesting to see. And then you kind of see that also with the Pokemon community, right? You see there's back in 2020 and 2020, early 2021, Pokemon cards were gone. There was nothing there. But that's because, everyone was starting to get back into their old hobbies that they enjoyed when they were kids and whatever. So there was a natural demand for it, right? And people didn't care necessarily about scalpers. That wasn't as big of an issue. But then you see in 2025, you see this very negative opinion on scalpers, which they definitely deserve. But there's this really interesting shift where Pokemon is extremely hard to find right now for little to no reason, and a lot of it is scalped and all that stuff, right? And just very not, it's a different type of divide than in the anime manga community, with what was going on there, but there's definitely a divide between people who actually care about Pokemon and the people who are there to try and make money, and kind of the negative views on that, and kind of creating a poser mentality. Scalpers are just posers. They don't actually care about Pokemon, all that type of stuff. And so that's kind of interesting to see. Star Wars has really been hit a lot by this kind of divided mentality on fandoms. Shows like The Acolyte and Skeleton Crew, they really did terribly just in general when they were releasing, and then people are, because there's a whole lot of controversy and there's a group of really outspoken fans who might call themselves true fans or whatever, that just really are outspoken and damage a show's reputation. Acolyte got hit really hard, Skeleton Crew not as much, but that kind of was forgotten about. And so that's just been interesting to see. And there's like a very like a lot more of a negative viewpoint on the people who would call themselves like the true fans of Star Wars and all that stuff, and the very outspoken like leaders of the fandom. It's just very interesting to see like how that has shifted in the past 5 years. There's a couple channels that I can think of that just like were huge, like big. I loved watching them. I know a lot of other people who loved watching them, but they just kind of fell off after they just only had very negative opinions about the content that they were watching, because negative engagement on social media makes people a lot of money. So just a very negative mentality to everything new, which some of it might be deserved and some of it might not. Because of the negative like true fan mentality, it's really impacted the Star Wars community in a way that 2 to 3 years ago would not really exist at all outside of the fringe. Like, yeah, for the most part, it was like more unified, if that makes sense. And then same thing kind of in the Lego community. I'm just kind of really naming the ones that I've really seen a lot in the Lego community. There's a couple channels that are very outspoken, like anti-Lego. And then you got kind of the ones that are kind of paid off by Lego, not paid off, but like, they get to review stuff for free. And so there's a very hardcore like base of fans that just like that are very outspoken against Lego and have very, very minute critiques about anything that Lego releases, and it just drives a lot of their engagement. But so kind of to refocus the video a little bit, fandoms, they've really started to weed out the hardcore, like, I'm a true fan type people who just like only have negative like feedback about different fandoms. And I think it's just really interesting to see that the really subtle shifts in fandom that have happened over the past year or two, just how like the people who are really hardcore fans are becoming less popular. And I think we're kind of reverting back to 2019 and before, where being nerds and being nerdy and being like outspoken about the stuff you like, the fandoms you enjoy, right, are not necessarily as badly like viewed in a negative light. But I think we're kind of heading in that direction, where maybe like a person having a Lego set is different than someone who's making YouTube videos on this little thing about this one minifigure. I think a good example is this Fives minifigure. Like critiquing there are a handful of critiques. Some of them I would say are valid. I think waist capes are definitely needed on this character. But there are other things, such as the helmet holes on the side of the figure, that people are very outspoken against, and for the most part, I think are a little overblown. And I think a lot of other people think that the people who are critiquing these things are taking it way too far and are being very aggressive. And so they're kind of distancing themselves away from that kind of negative mentality about the fandom. Long story short, I think we're headed in a direction where it's okay to like something, but those people who are extremely hardcore, different stereotypes about them, are starting to pop up again. I think that's just very interesting to see. Have a great day. Ciao.